first philosophy class I ever took was in my last year of high school. That same semester, I had chemistry and physics and advanced functions, but of course, philosophy was my favorite. We were fortunate enough to have just a phenomenal teacher who had us reading university-level texts at a slower pace, and for once, a class was teaching me not what to think, but how to think. Fast forward a couple of years later, and here I am, a economics and philosophy double major. Of course, my parents initially had other plans, and who could blame them? I mean, if I had a dime for every time someone asked me if I'd planned on being a well-read Starbucks barista, then my financial stability wouldn't be a matter of concern in the first place. Science has given us a great many advancements, but science was birthed from philosophy. Philosophers built and expounded and defended the empirical model with the likes of Locke, Berkeley, Hume, and the American pragmatists, and Aristotle himself is considered to be the father of empiricism. There was a time when questions about the physical structure of the earth and the sky and life were matters for the philosopher. Of course, now on our PowerPoint slides, we changed their titles to early scientists, but they themselves understood themselves and called themselves philosophers. Amongst other things, the atomic theory traces its roots back to a pre-Socratic philosopher named Democritus. Natural selection goes as far back as the ancient Roman Epicurean Lucretius, and Diderot anticipated this fact a whole 2 centuries in advance. The reach of philosophy doesn't stop here. I mean, the implications of scientific advancement were considered even before we had the technology to make things remotely possible. I mean, Descartes asked questions and anticipated the moral dilemmas that would come with virtual reality when he asked, what if we were all just brains in a vat? And he even considered the consciousness of robots and clones. Philosophy, by granting the human mind license to think freely and creatively, unbound by the constraints of reality today, paved and paves all great civilizations. The social sciences, on the other hand, are often criticized for having models based on unrealistic assumptions and a weaker record with regard to predictive accuracy than that of the physical sciences. Milton Friedman's response to this, however, is that the oversimplification, so-called oversimplification, and the sometimes unrealistic assumptions that come with that actually make a model better because it is able to simplify an abstract reality into more elementary terms that give us the predictive capability we need. Theories, in this sense, are tools we humans use to make sense of the world that is really complex and give us the predictive capability that we need. Historically speaking, the absoluteness of the models we employ isn't always guaranteed. I mean, at one point we thought that the entire cosmos revolved around the Earth, and a more recent example would be how we'd accepted the Bohr-Rutherford model of, electrons revolving around atomic nuclei in a distinct 2-8-8-18-18-32 pattern. Just a show of hands, how many people think that parallel lines never intersect? Well, with the rise of non-Euclidean geometry, they actually found that in certain bent spaces, for example, parallel lines do intersect. I mean, if you've ever looked at a globe, for example, you see the spheres, and if you look at the longitudinal lines, they kind of intersect at the very top, and they're figuring out that the fifth posit of Euclid, when he built, planar geometry, isn't necessary because they tried to disprove it by assuming the contrary and seeing if they found a contradiction, and they're unable to. So that's an example. And while it does take a certain maturity to grasp and accept that uncertainty, it doesn't mean that we scrap our models and our model making altogether. I mean, our models stay relevant in the face of this uncertainty because of the fact that they give us some way of navigating the reality that we live in. With regard to the social sciences' predictive accuracy, then, we have to keep in mind that This brand of scientist is trying to master a much more mercurial beast than that of the physical sciences. The laws of nature stay the same over time, but our social and cultural climate can change overnight. Because we as a society actually have a hand in building our own social realities, the models we choose to test and employ can alter the very nature of what it is we're trying to measure. Take, for example, how the way we choose to measure progress has changed in the last few centuries, where in earlier agrarian societies, progress was measured simply by improved yields and improved outcomes for disease. Today, we use a peculiar construct, which is gross domestic product. GDP has directly altered the way we humans experience reality. Because of the strongly held belief that GDP is the be-all and end-all marker of success, we now have policymakers and big business that attempt to increase growth without taking into consideration the costs not included in GDP, like environmental damage or quality of life. The models we choose to believe in and implement change the way we see ourselves and the way we structure our lives and our societies, altogether changing the way we behave. It's like having someone press the reset button on you every few decades. This shouldn't take away from the legitimacy of the social sciences, but foster within us a greater reverence for it. The role of the arts, then, is to take these social ideas that have sort of been brewing in the background, sometimes in academia for years and years, and to get us all thinking and talking about it. Of course, it frequently also works the other way around, because what truly great art does, and why it stays so relevant for such a long period of time, is it holds a mirror up to society and says, look, this is what you look like. Do you like what you see? One of my first-year philosophy professors had once made a passing comment about how he thought that the way we humans had started thinking about morality in the first place was when we'd started drawing on cave walls, and we looked at the pictures and said, this isn't right, this is ugly. And Hume himself has built a theory of morality based on intuitive sentiments or aesthetic evaluation. Regardless of the initial intentions of the artist, the reason certain works endure over time is because of its capacity to get us to see ourselves in newer and newer ways and initiate self-reflection. We're still moved by Hamlet's musings on life and existence and morality and deceit, and we still recoil at the cautionary tragedy of Macbeth because it still speaks to our humanity. Some people think Andy Warhol's Campbell soup cans is a statement about the transformative power of the institution of high art, while others think it's subversive satire on capitalism. That's the sort of magic of the arts. It comes alive in and through its audience. And the beauty we find here, conventional or sublime, in the words of Gabriel Garcia Marquez or the guitar strings of B.B. King, is what inspires in us enough feeling and humanity to make existing worthwhile in the first place. It is all of these things working together alongside the sciences that create a society that allow its citizens to flourish and live fulfilling lives. Rather than pelting each other with questions of legitimacy, then we've got to figure out how to work together, start the necessary conversations, ask the right questions, and use the strengths of each field to reclaim our identities and build ourselves a social reality that is just and beautiful and full of hope. Otherwise, we risk our own mass production and inch ourselves ever closer to our own unfeeling automation. Thank you.